My name is Eduardus Halim, and I was born in Indonesia and raised there, and I came here to study music at Juilliard, and I finished with my master and then continued with professional study, where I studied with Sasha Goranitsky's and then with Rudolf Verkuschening. And subsequently, I had the last year of Mr. Horowitz, I studied with him, and I have also been coming to NYU for the past 6 years on courtesy of NYU and courtesy of my dear friend here, Ron. So, and yeah, and been happy ever since here. Yeah. Well, he taught me one of the most important thing I think is how I should practice, how to see things. You know, sometimes we see things, but not quite see actual thing. You know, it's sort of maybe what all of us say. You know, Busoni says, see beyond the music, or Mr. Horowitz would say, you know, behind the notes. I mean, or between the notes, or whatever, under the notes. But the point is, we have to read and what the composer's intention is, and hopefully translate it through it clearly. I think that was one of his, you know, Horowitz was known as a romantic pianist, so-called, you know, the grand romantic pianist tradition that is sort of, you know, I remember Mr. Schomburg used to say, you know, oh, you know, he was the last. And by that, we always implied as if like it was sort of arbitrary, you know, not, but no, I think it's quite to the contrary. I think he read the music as carefully, I must say, maybe as Rudolf Serkin was. And the respect for the score was equally strong, I felt, you know. It was never spur of the moment things, you know, to as if change score and stuff like that. No, but he read it, and then that was I found it very inspiring. And the next things I found it the most, of course, which is the most important. He always felt you should find your own voice, constantly look for it, and by that, you know, I always felt it's a years of experience, not just simply you find your voice somewhere. No, it's something you keep trying, and that is terribly inspiring. And I found also he speaks greatly. I always found, you know, the ingredients in the most important things in music, for instance, in art for that matter, in my opinion, of course, in a lot of artists' opinions too, is that, you know, you have to have a great deal of hearts, and accompanied by expertise, you know, and accompanied by the technique and with the intellect. But I think I come to the realization that it is three of them are important, but I think the heart is even more important. I found, you know, I start discovering more convinced. Yeah. And then Mr. Horowitz was one of the very rare musicians that was able to do that. And speaking of Mr. Horowitz too, I mean, if I speak about Mr. Goranitsky's, you know, he was the same in many ways. You know, he speaks with a great deal of passion. You know, and when he sings, his tone, that tone quality he put on the piano, he taught me over the years, all his students. It's an inspiration, and then to this day I'm still trying to find, you know, it's just getting there, you know, and then I feel more comfortable. But that's the result of singing. That singing comes directly from you know, the guts, you know, and that's not something that music's on the score. Yeah, there's some expression and whatnot, but by them showing to us and the importance of it, I think that is fundamental, you know. And so I felt when I teach my students here, and it's very important, I should be able to send the same message to them, you know, and of course finding each one of them very different and with different need, but each one of them will find their own voice someday. If they're able to do that, I would consider that a success on my part. So, you know, it's not a very tangible thing, you know, and they have to find the voices is something so, yeah, sounds great, but it's not something I can explain A to B to C. But there's so many ingredients, you know, that means to go through their lives, you know, go through their ups and downs, and they go through their success and their failure, but the main thing is that the discipline of constantly staying at it, you know, practicing carefully, and to instill that discipline. And so with the discipline, the voice will show up itself. But if it's never quite the discipline quite there, and it's difficult, you know, it could be this, it could be that, you know, some moment is good, some moment not so good, and they have constantly to build that fundamental technique and fundamental practice. That's very important, I think. And they will, I'm sure. They're good enough musicians, which is, they are very strong here, they are very smart people here, and I think they're able to do it. I would see the individual very important, I think, the shape of the hand and then also the ability to play the instrument, and then, of course, also the tone in which the student produce, sometimes maybe it's still lacking. I think I understand which apparatus needs to be strengthened, and by that then I look, and also student will tell me, what they like. I mean, it's the best way is that if the students say, they're passionate about contemporary music, for instance, and then I say, by all means, bring it, and then if they're passionate about Schumann, about Debussy, I say, sure, you should bring something like that, and some kids would, they would bring his own piece, and brilliant kids, and we will work differently. So there's not really a standard per se, but however, if you see, for instance, the apparatus is weak, I know if hopefully, I don't have always the answer to everything, but I know roughly if that's what it takes, then some pieces will help certain ways, and of course on top of that, teaching them how I would attack them in hopefully according to their hand also, and I think being a teacher, sometimes I always wonder, and about that. Maybe I went through my own struggle, meaning to be able to play the instrument well enough. I have gone quite a few years of discovering myself, and difficult, not so difficult, but those experiences also help to understand why they are in that situation, I think, so that I could address them more sympathetically, I hope so. I teach the piano. The piano is just happened to be an instrument in itself, but I didn't. Of course, I loved it, even the sensation of playing the piano. I love to see when some of my students could play piano so beautifully, and that's so wonderful. But in the end, it's a mean of expression. That is the most important part, I think, because if that is not sufficient enough, as again it gets back to the heart. If it's not sufficient enough, I think that's. Is not a success. I think they would consider maybe become boring. It's not piano, but in itself is not interesting. Piano, it's once you can make something out of it, speak something, and actually say something, communicate, then becoming an incredible instrument. I think that goes with every other instrument. But I would think maybe piano is a very difficult instrument to achieve that. For me, is if I see the person. Very much so, sometimes if I find a person, there's a great deal of eagerness wanting to know. That I think is one of the ingredients, one of the key ingredients, I think, that would make it a faster learner. But if the student good, but a little bit oblivious to how other people feel, or oblivious of what he knows or she knows, that could be a bit problem addressing that. So we have to go through different issues altogether. But I found it the best way, is if that eagerness wanting to listen, and wanting to find out, wanting to explore. I think it's truly the easiest to teach, I think, and the most joyful to teach, actually. Yeah, they should go listen to all the great one, and also not so great one, or maybe. Sometimes not a very good one too, sometimes. I mean, I meant it to every facets of so in many ways you could learn from why it's not so good, why it's not a success, why is it not communicating. And the great ones certainly, I remember I was struck very much by Mr. Horowitz playing, certainly his playing. No one can ever come close what he was doing, because that's how he plays, that's what he believes. And however, to be inspired by it is nothing wrong, to be inspired. One must be inspired, but I think it's a different approach if saying, I need to be an individual and just simply blinded by the fact that there's other things. Then I think that's also very confining. I don't think that's a good way also. So I would suggest, I always suggest my student, please listen to I adore Cortot, for instance, as a pianist, and it's so incredibly spontaneous. I mean, Hoffman, Horowitz, of course, Friedman, and there's so many other, also today's pianists. I mean, there's I mean, wonderful. Lupus, wonderful. I think he's a beautiful musician. There's Zimmerman, who is a very strong pianist and also speaks very eloquently, I thought. So there's Martha Argerich, who is mercurial. So, that's I remember De La Rocha very well. So, and that also it's it's why they are so fantastic, and then we learn quite a bit from them. I think from tradition-wise, I also was struck, when I was struck by the fact, even Mr. Horowitz, I was quite embarrassed actually. At one point, when I was studying with him, he would practice with me, and then, I said, and I still remember it's a passage in Chopin sonatas where absolute precision is said, no, do it this, no faster, no, this tempo, absolutely. And raise everything the same, and strike everything forte, staccato, semi-legatos, portamento, pianissimo, and I was really kind of feeling, oh my God, am I imposing on your time? And then I said, no, I have patience, and that strikes me that, it is sort of, I knew I had to be very, very careful with that, and I still remember also I read about Hoffman's. If my recollection could be sort of rather varied, but in principle, I think I understand that, Anton Rubinstein used to go around school knocking on doors, if they hear, too fast! And Goronisi was the same. They say, and Firkushi understand too. And I remember I saw him practice at home, and this degree of discipline and it's very important, I think. The more, so it's not something that, when people said, wow, Mr. Horowitz was an incredible pianist. Yes, of course he was an incredible pianist, but it was not something he was born with. Yes, of course he was born with an incredible talent. I mean, also incredible physical attribute. There's no question, and he knows that too. But it is the work that he put in there makes very cultivated pianism. It's not like an ordinary pianist, but it's a very cultivated because that's how he works. So by practicing with incredible discipline and patience, that is what is required, I think. Yeah. And sometimes we like to play more so than practice. We're all guilty of it, Yeah. Singing, openness of the tone, I think, and power certainly, and color certainly, ability of gradations, and I will tell you this much, to tell whether the pianist knows their piano, not necessarily. It's better the piano builder knows their pianos. But we all like to say, oh, I know, of course. But we are a temperamental group, but we said, I think we are the worst type to deal with. The piano technician always have headache, but they know what they're doing. We think we know because we feel. So when that part I could say, I said I'd like this sound a little bit this way, it's everything intangible, but a good technician who knows you're playing, I think they have to be so sympathetic with your playing to understand what it is that you want. But I can imagine that there's 100 pianists requesting for so many nuances. So instead, I could tell what I like in the piano, but whether I could tell a good piano from a bad piano, sometimes debatable. But I know something obvious I could tell. But if something whether this piano potential could be a great piano, whatnot, is sometimes we need more help than, I'll be the one who said, at least from my experience, I would rely on the person who knows their piano well. I had encountered, but in fact I had the luxury also of playing Mr. Horowitz pianos. When I gave a recital in New York, I still remember Mr. Horowitz was very saying, you could use my piano, and I said, I could? Yeah, go this time, I'll take care of you, so I did. So I said, it could be too big for you. Yeah, I know. But, it's like driving a Ferrari, so when, you're given a chance, you drive in 42nd Street, okay, maybe it's too fast, that car for New York Road, okay, but you try it at least, So, but the difference, yes, Franz Mohr was a genius. I think he was a genius. To be able to have that sound and it feels it's incredible, that instrument, and he did it again when I recorded, and he did it for the recording, not Mr. Horowitz piano, but he was able to achieve that. And subsequently, I played with Chopin concerto. He came and did the same thing, and with different instruments. So it's the technician is so important. It's so important, I think. They understand what musician wants, So that also, I think that's an artistry in itself, I think, yeah. The tone production, I think, is the main thing for the school that I went to. I mean, when we were at Juilliard, I think from the Levin, Joseph Levin school, Charlotte school, I think from all that period of so-called, if you think of the Russian golden age, you know, the tradition, so-called the Russian tradition came in the 20s, I would believe, in the 20s and 30s. They all came mainly to New York or to Curtis, you know, and some of them went to Europe, but majority come to United States. But, you know, you think of Leschetizky school, for instance, also. I mean, they have beautiful sound, you know, gorgeous tone, you know, and I think that was what I pretty much felt that Mr. Gorensky was trying to instill in us, and that is the Levin school, which is, I think they great deal use their weight and just unadorned type of weight from your arm, and yet they use a great deal of their flesh, more flesh in order to create that thick, I mean, projected sound, you know, and penetrating sound, and so it varies, you know, and I think that's very important, you know, and also, to me, the color of the piano instrument is so important. The piano has ability to make color, all kind of color, and that has to do with the agility of the apparatus on this, from the finger, the reflexes on this. And by that I'm saying, you know, you could play flat, you could play also semi, you could play tippy, you could play very curved, and it would create a different sound. And it depends on the attack of the key, you know. You could get by the agility, but in order to do that, one had to have ability to a quickness of this, but that has to be trained. And then with the singing sound, it's more deeper, you know, and you have to feel the constantly to the bed of the key, and that also very important, you know, sometimes to create sound, you know, beautiful sound, and that's very important. But there's no limit. I mean, there's no limit. I remember, meaning no limit that I don't want to limit myself, and I don't want to limit anybody who I would suggest to them, you have to find. I mean, I still used to remember that, you know, you could use your nose to make a beautiful sound, by all means. But the point is that is everything that can be used, all apparatus of your hand, a finger, in order to achieve the expression. Yes, by all means. More like what the expression says. For instance, you know, if it is a great deal of sorrow or something, you know, and or it is something very mysterious, or is it something, the touches could be different. Even pedals greatly varied, you know, in infinitum. I mean, this is also another set. You know. I could maybe to play Chopin another piece. Sound, so we try to instill that very much. Sometimes, for instance, in the requiebros, for instance, of the Granadas, for instance, what is being said. Sometimes touch is important, to be very light or very leggiero or portamento. It's sometimes like talking, half singing, you know. And pedal play a great deal, the most important I found. Yeah, pedal is of utmost important, and yet not very much addressed. In the sense, when we were a child, we were told that you put the pedal on the downbeat and then off when the harmonic change, and that's good when you're just starting. But on the other hand, if too much notion of that not being addressed, that also is gonna make people, children for that matter, adult for that matter, is thinking in one way. But when the fact is that you can mix 2-3 harmonies at the same time, and ability to create after effect, and all that coloring, it's sometimes combined 2-3 harmonies, not necessarily just one harmony per se all the time. So pedal depends. It's so inexact, and yet to say, oh, there's a rule to it, no. And I think that's the rule. I guess the most important one is the ear, the govern. So do I have exact things to say? Oh, you must do this, you must do that, maybe a quarter, half. That's too mechanical or too technical to speak. The student have to be able to hear it, but by constantly instilling it with them, I still remember, Harold Schomburg, who was really, in many ways in my life, was very instrumental also. He was really a fantastic man. I mean, and not only the most, I think, considered the most knowledgeable man. I mean, in music, for especially the Romantic school. And he was always said, every time I play concerts, or I would go through the concert, program with him, and I said, your pedal. But by saying that, constantly I make me thinking, why, what's it, maybe then less, constantly less. By the time finally it dawned on me, if I know how to play without pedal, that means I don't depend on pedal. Then the pedal can be applied as a luxury, not a necessity. And that takes a long time for me. But but nevertheless, I considered I was happy to understand a little bit better than before. But had it not been, so there's so many apparatus in piano playing that it's just not simply your finger has to be fantastic, your heart has to be beautiful, your ear has to be fantastic, your head has to be super, but your foot has to be good too. And not only your right foot, your left foot has to be good too. Because then you have to put the una corda. Then what do you do with your una corda? By mixing una corda, sometimes Mr. Horowitz says, put una corda, you put una corda and sing it somehow out, and you're going to have the most teneramente sounding, tenderness, but with a great deal of projection. So it's unlimited. There's almost no limit what one can do on the piano. So and to say there's a rule, yes, you have to be disciplined. But the rule is for you to be free. After being a bit able to achieve the highest discipline, then the freedom will come. I guess with everything else. Freedom in itself is not freedom. Freedom has to be after you are so disciplined that you know how to be free. Otherwise, it will be just chaotic, That's the ultimate. It's the ultimate that one should communicate freely, and like the jazz musician, we always amazed, how the hell they do that? It's so spontaneous, And percussion used to tell me, sometimes you sing, just think of like Ella, I know. So that sense of direct talking to you, that in music what we call maybe parlando, it's something equating to that. It's not, we all learned how to sing, but how to talk is just as equally important, I think. How to whisper is equally important sometimes. And so that once become part of you, hopefully we all try, once the music becoming so connected, like one talks to you through music, Yeah, but it takes a lot of work, so